I'm continuing my discussion of Francesca in Canto 5 of Dante's Inferno. And the interesting thing about Dante beginning in this outer circle of lust is that he is pointing to something very universal. Now, this is kind of the beauty of Dante. He's very particular. He's talking about an Italian woman in Florence in the 13th century. The poem, remember, is set in the year 1300. And yet the theme is universal. And Dante moves between the particular and the universal beautifully. And you may say, well, what's the relationship? What is the relationship between all this particularity, this scheming guy over here and that woman over there? How does the particular relate to the universal? Well, we see the universal in the particular. That's kind of Dante's point, is he doesn't give you theoretical generalizations. He shows you a person. And in her, you begin to see this bigger question of what is really the sin here, and what is the punishment, and how does the punishment, in a sense, fit the crime? Now, here's Francesca. We were going line by line, and I'm not going to do every line, but I'm going to do a bunch of them, because I think a close reading illuminates this big question that Dante is addressing about sin. So here's Francesca continuing her conversation. Notice that she speaks to Dante. He doesn't speak to her. She addresses him. O living creature, O animal. And here we go on. She says this remarkable thing. If we could claim as friend the King of Kings, we would beseech him that he grant you peace. Now, notice the kind of courtesy and grace with which Francesca is speaking. You know, if we were in speaking terms with God. Now, notice here how, for Francesca, it's almost as if style is all that matters, because she doesn't just have like a little bit of a falling out with God, like, hey, we're not talking right now, but things are going to be okay. She's in eternal separation from God. But she's saying to Dante, it's kind of too bad, like, we're not on better terms with God. We would get him to grant you peace if we could talk to him, but he's not going to listen to us, is he? And then she goes on to talk about her transgression, which from her point of view was not really a transgression at all, but in fact something imposed on her from the outside. Let's see. This is Francesca. Love, quick to kindle in the gentle heart, seized this one for the beauty of my body. Who's this one? Well, that's Paolo. That's the guy behind her. Paolo's behind her. He's kind of twisted and buffeted in a kind of expression of agony, but he doesn't speak. And Francesca doesn't use his name either. She goes, this guy right here, he was after my body. But why? Because love kind of kindled that in him. And then she goes on to explain and kind of excuse both of them. Quote, love that excuses no one from loving seized me so strongly with delight in him that, as you can see, he never leaves my side. Love led us straight to sudden death together. Now, notice that this is, well, in English literature, we call it a personification. Love is kind of not a feeling, but is made into kind of a person. So love, with a capital L, and notice the repetition, love made us do this, love made us do that. And so what Francesca is really saying is that I was taken captive by this external being, love, almost like Cupid's arrow got me, got him too. And so here we are, and that's what took us to sudden death. And then she goes on to say, very interesting twist of phrase, she goes, Caina, I'll talk about that in a minute, awaits the one who quenched our lives. Now, what's Caina? Well, that's actually one of the deeper circles of hell. So what Francesca is saying is the guy who killed us, actually her husband, who caught her and Paolo kind of in the act, he belongs in the deep circle of hell. So let's think about this for a second. Basically, Francesca is saying is, I'm not to blame. Why? Because I committed a crime of passion. Passion, love seized me. It made me do this. It made Paolo do this. But as for my husband, who's kind of stumbled in on us and was like, whoa, and then reacted by killing us both, it wasn't a crime of passion for him. No, no, no. He is a treacherous guy. He deserves everything that's coming to him. We expect to see him not just here in hell in the outer circles, but in one of the deepest circles of hell. So he's going to be held accountable for his actions, but not me and not my partner here, Paolo. Now, we cannot at this point attach any real significance to what Francesca is saying. Do we know whether her husband is in hell? No, we don't hear anything more about him. Dante never touches on the subject at all. But I think if once we know the schema of hell and of purgatory and of heaven, we have to realize that people who have done far worse things than Francesca's husband can be found. Some of them can be found in hell, some of them can be found in purgatory, and others can be found in heaven. Let's remember, it all depends on whether you repent. And the question unanswered and unknown is, did in fact Francesca's husband repent? Now, what's really interesting is when Dante hears this, his reaction is remarkable. He says, I sighed, and this is what Dante says, alas, all those sweet thoughts, and oh, how much desiring brought these two down into this agony. So Dante is on Francesca's side here. And it's very important to realize that in taking Francesca's side, Dante is against God. Why? Because God put Francesca here. And the big question throughout Inferno is, do all these sinners, some of whom are very crafty, very personable, we would say, very good at explaining themselves, did God make a mistake? Was God unjust in sticking them here in hell to suffer these torments? And the answer of the Inferno is always no. God is always right. These are people who are covering up their misdeeds. But here is Dante falling for it in the way that, by the way, critics over the centuries have fallen. I literally have read essays on things like, oh, Paolo and Francesca conquered hell. Yes, they're in hell, but they're together. They have overcome, if you will, the fires of hell. And this is all nonsense. This is all completely alien to what Dante is getting at. The reason that Paolo is writhing in a kind of torment is he doesn't want to be there. Neither does Francesca, as we'll see tomorrow. Francesca is not happy about being in hell. She's actually not happy about having Paolo by her side. Why? Because the two of them standing there naked, it's a matter for her of disgrace, of shame, and of torment. And what she's trying to give Dante is an account of how it's so unfortunate that we've ended up here. We've ended up like this. And at this point, Dante is a complete sucker. And what he says in effect, and we'll get to this tomorrow, is he tells Francesca, tell me more. And what does Francesca do? Come up with an even more elaborate, and I would say diabolical explanation of what made her do it. And we'll conclude tomorrow with how Francesca continues her remarkable rationalization in Canto 5.